Like many of you, I grew up surrounded by screens. And everything started pretty harmless by playing the incredible game Pong with my grandfather at age 7. Things got a lot more serious in my teenage years as I went from playing to actually working with computers. I experimented with early design software, and then the internet came along, got really excited about that. And a few years later, found myself starting an interactive design firm. And without much forethought, I had created a highly digital lifestyle for myself. A lifestyle that had me spend far more time interacting with screens than with people for more than 10 years. And I began to realize that I quite literally started hiding behind my screens. I kept myself occupied late into the night, relied heavily on email, and I was more apt to fill out a lengthy form online than to simply pick up the phone or meet somebody in person. And by my mid-20s, I started feeling really disconnected and looking for more balance and more purpose in my life. And that was the first time I asked myself the question whether this digital lifestyle may have had a negative impact on my well-being. Coincidentally, right around that time, my professional responsibility shifted from being a behind-the-scenes thinker and doer to becoming the outside face of my company, which of course was all about connecting with people. And I realized I was not equipped to make that happen. I was terrified, but it was that perfect storm that sent me on a quest to connect with the world. And everywhere I went, I was looking for more human interaction, which turned out to be even more challenging than I had imagined. Here's a picture of my local coffee shop, where I found more people having coffee with their computers than their friends. And it was rather tough to connect with anybody in this type of environment. I also came across a Facebook page that pretty accurately described my experience at the time that I had in most public spaces. This is a page for people who like staring at their phones while on an elevator to avoid the awkward silence. And this is a real Facebook page, I did not make this up. That same year, the University of Chicago published a study that indicated that we may in fact be living more isolated lives than in the past. In 1985, we saw the average American had 3 people in whom to confide with on personal matters. By 2004, the number dropped to 2, and 1 out of 4 had nobody to share this kind of conversation with at all. And I began to get a bit distressed with my observations. Had our digital lifestyle in fact robbed us of the ability to connect with one another? Much has been discussed at the time about the possible negative impact of the internet, in short suggesting this new medium has an addictive quality that may lead to the demise of our society. And while I have no doubt that the internet had a huge impact and still has a huge impact on our behavior, this idea that this new medium is the sole cause for a negative cultural trend just didn't sit well with me. And I was looking for a more empowering framework to look at this issue. The author James Gleick provides such a framework in his recent book, The Information, and he says, every new medium transforms the nature of human thought. In the long run, history is the story of information becoming aware of itself. Now, if you think back in time, we quickly realize we've seen these kind of transformations before in the past. The introduction of the printing press, radio, and television all significantly altered the way we think because it revolutionized our access to information and knowledge. So if we accept the fact that the internet is bringing about this kind of change, just as every other new medium has done in the past, the question no longer is whether the internet is good or bad for us, but how we best manage that kind of change. So this transformative effect that James Gleick is referring to becomes a positive one. How do we design for connection so new technology can bring us together as human beings? Or in other words, how do we humanize technology? I connected so deeply with this question, ended up dedicating my entire career to finding answers. And my first quest was to find out what it is that makes an experience human and rich in connection to begin with. And after a long night of research, I found my first guiding principle: empathy. According to Wikipedia, empathy is the capacity to recognize and to some extent share feelings that are being experienced by another sapient being. When I first read these lines, I wasn't quite sure whether this was a skill I inherently possessed. And I got a bit worried when I continued reading, and on that same article found a little further down that a lack of empathy may qualify me as a psychopath. Luckily, I kept researching, and I came across John Cunningham's take on empathy, which made the situation look a little better. He says, empathy is full presence to what's alive in the other person at this moment. And something really clicked for me when I read that. And I realized that in order for me to find these deep relationships I was looking for, I'd first have to be truly interested in and engaged with the people around me. And it became clear to me that empathy may be that secret ingredient that can actually make our interactions more human. Predictably, I was behind a screen when I had that breakthrough. But I've since adopted this principle of empathy as one of my core design principles. And for the designers here, I'm not simply talking about an empathic design process that involves an audience in the design process, but to create experiences that in themselves foster empathy and connection. And I've focused much of my energy on three specific areas in which a lack of empathy is absolutely unacceptable for me. The first one is healthcare. Healthcare is a system we experience as a patient when we find ourselves in a highly vulnerable state, and often in largely unknown territory. The second area is education, because it is through education that we groom our future leaders who are about to shape the values of our society. And third is public space. My vision for public space is to make it the most natural place for human interaction. And unfortunately, I don't see this kind of interaction happening in many public spaces today. I'm going to share two projects with you that demonstrate this kind of thinking. One from the area of education, and another one relating to public space. Let me start with our most recent educational initiative. This is the iSlate. It's a low-cost learning device developed by Rice University and NTU in Singapore to provide a platform for teacher-less education. And while this idea may sound controversial at first, the objective here is not to replace our teachers by technology, but to provide a basic education in areas where there are no teachers, or where there's just simply not enough teachers. The initial rollout of this program is happening in India, and I want to share a few statistics with you that demonstrate the need for this type of initiative. In 2008, we saw only 15% of Indian students reaching high school, with just 7% graduating. There's over 400,000 primary schools who only have 1 or 2 teachers on staff, and 25% of teaching positions nationwide remain vacant. The current literacy rate in India, 82% for men, 62% for women, which in fact is in line with the recent statistics published by the United Nations that still show large areas across the globe with literacy rates under 70%. The iSlate is specifically designed for these regions. It's not just a low-performance tablet. It's a custom piece of hardware and software, a single-function device that is optimized for learning. The current version keeps track of students' progress through textbooks and exercises, and it provides rewards, gentle nudges, and positive encouragements to guide the students through the curriculum at their own pace. I was able to witness the power of this program as part of a recent field visit to the village in India where we're field testing our prototypes. And I found students truly enthusiastic about the ability to learn with these devices, even though the content at the time was limited to a mere digital translations of the textbooks they already had in their hands. And my observation was also in line with a study by NTU and our local partner, NGO Vidal, that showed that the students' ability to learn rose consistently during this initial trial period. And while this is all extremely exciting, what I'm most passionate about is to bring a true human element to this device by launching a peer learning and mentorship program that would allow students to connect with one another and with a global network of mentors. These mentors will guide students beyond the standardized curriculum, and we're starting with a writing program. We're expanding into design, the arts, and other collaborative projects that foster creative expression. And by connecting students and mentors who literally are on opposite sides of the world, we aren't only looking to solving a resource problem around rural education, but to expand the roles of those involved and to really open up the ability to empathize in the process. The first phase of this program is scheduled to launch at the end of this year. I'm really excited that we have our partner school in India, as well as school in Los Angeles, and the Indian students will be able to interact with these new mentors and these other students through the latest version of the iSlate devices. But let me shift gears and go from something a little serious that deals with education to something a little more fun that deals with how could we inject some empathy in our everyday public spaces. GLOW is an event by the city of Santa Monica that turns Santa Monica Beach into a massive gallery for large-scale participatory artworks for one night every 2 years. And we invite the public to come join us and reimagine how we could interact with each other a little better in public spaces. And I want to share 2 artworks from this event with you, because they're 2 brilliant examples how interactive experiences can actually bring us together. So imagine walking down the beach. And as you walk down the beach late at night, you hear the sea of voices in the distance. Thousands of people around you. You keep walking towards these sounds you hear, and you see this mirage of color. And what you're looking at here is a real-time visualization of the sounds and voices generated by you and everyone around you. In other words, you're walking into an experience that you and those around you have created together in this very moment. This piece was called Primal Source by the artist Usman Hague, and it captured the audience's attention until the morning hours. And you'll see thousands of people collaborating, competing, and as the following clip will demonstrate, at times screaming off the top of their lungs. He was our biggest fan. Let me talk about a second project next. It's a project called Sandbox. It's another brilliant example of how to break down this invisible wall between strangers. This piece by Raphael Lozano-Hammer recorded the movement of people on the beach and then projected the movement into two small sandboxes on either side of the installation as ghost-like images. And as we saw people interacting with these ghost-like images, their hands were being recorded and projected back onto the beach in huge scale using two of the world's brightest projectors mounted off cranes. And we saw thousands of people playing in the sandbox, truly breaking down any awkwardness around interacting with someone you've never met before. This is my favorite one. It's good exercise too. But what inspires me even more than these brilliant artworks is the response we received. We were hoping for 20,000, maybe 30,000 people to show up for our first event. And we had almost 250,000 attendees at the inaugural event. And what this demonstrates to me is that there's a hunger. There's a cultural need for this type of experience that brings us together and allows us to connect with one another. And as we connect, we learn more about ourselves and more about each other. And it's this understanding that enables growth and change in each of us and the world around us. A more connected society starts with everyday interactions. Every business model we design, every policy we put in place, every major change in society starts with human interaction. And in closing, I want to ask you to connect for a change. Next time you're in a coffee shop or elevator, talk to the stranger next to you. And here's why. When we focus on ourselves, our world contracts as our problems and preoccupations loom large. But when we focus on others, our world expands. Thank you.